And inevitably somebody's going to ask the question of how difficult is this to install. So the way this, you can see there's a little bit of a space between it and the motherboard, and that's by design, because I wanted to make sure that this port, this H-nth jack, was as close to center on the old RF output, the RCA jack that was on the back, kind of a hybrid RCA jack. So what I do is I include with the kit these little spacers here, and you just here's what the board looks like, and you just pop those little guys off after you've got the board in. And what you can do is you can take these spacers and you can stack them on top of each other, and 2 spacers is basically the same height as this space under here. So these 2 make up this space. That just about perfectly centers this port in the middle. And let's take a look and see what this looks like. So what you're doing is you're putting basically 10 headers on. You're putting 4 pairs. Here is a pair of headers. Here's a pair. Here's a pair. And sorry, here's a pair. And then you're putting 2 individual headers here and here. And when I say headers, let me show you what I mean. They're square pin headers. They're just DuPont headers. They're breakaway pins. And what you'll do is you'll break them off in pairs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you will solder them to the board first. You'll actually be soldering them in with the short side up through the bottom of the board. And then on the bottom, let's see what this looks like. They are sticking through what used to be the solder tabs for the RF modulator. Here are the 2 pins. Here's video, here's audio. This is actually a frequency clock for the old RF modulator, and I think this is like a positive 12 volts. Anyway, you don't need pins 2 and pins 4 on these headers that are normally going into the RF modulator. So what you do is when these pins come up, they're pretty well centered. What I do is I split them apart, so they will come up almost horizontal to each other, and then what you do is you'll bend them out as they stick through this. Take a big blob of solder around this area and just melt around it so that it sticks to those pins, and then obviously solder this one and this one. And then when you're done with your angle cutters, you're just going to come in and snip those pieces off, and then I come back in and I reflow the solder on those things. So this board is on there very, very, very hard, so you can't, once you get these solder joints in place, it's not going anywhere. That's kind of what it looks like through the thing. You can see it's actually a little taller than just the black plastic spacer. So you're not going to push that spacer all the way in. You're going to use those 2 spacer pieces to make sure that it's centered just perfect. So that's more of the mechanical details of the Aquarius card. I did talk about this pin header here, which is where we're tapping, sorry, let me back up a little bit. This pin header here, which is where we're tapping 5 volts. If you take a desoldering iron like this to, where am I headed? Here. So if you take a desoldering iron to this guy, which we're not going to do, there's actually a hole there. It's called a via. It's how we get electric signals from the top of the board to the bottom. Well, when you suck that solder out of there, it will actually fit one of these right angle pin headers. And these pin headers, there's one here where the 5 volts is coming in, and here where it's actually coming from the board. Those pin headers look a little bit different than the other ones that I showed you. So here's straight pin headers, and here's, pardon me, here's the angled ones, right here. So you can see they're at a right angle. And I actually pushed that black plastic all the way up to about here on them, so they are as close to the motherboard as possible before I put them in. And then, like the others, I trimmed the leads off the back. So this is how we get 5 volts power to power the video amp and then all of these capacitors. The channel switch obviously is no use anymore. There's nothing really going through it. And all it did was to either activate this little capacitor, which technically is not needed anymore, which toggles between the 2 channel 4 and channel 3 frequencies. So you could technically take this and this off as well too, but there's no harm in them being there. So I think that's it.